All right.
Okay. So welcome. Thank you all for joining us. I'm Dan Elitzer, and
I'm Tara. Nice to meet you.
we're members of the IDEO CoLab team, and we're really excited to be talking to everyone today. I think probably a lot of you guys are participants in the IDEO plus CoinList Hackathon with our friends from Ethereum Foundation, Near, Stellar, Oasis, and Tezos. And we're going to be doing a little talk today to share with you both some of our thoughts on where some of the gaps are today in terms of building decentralized apps and creating a great user experience, but also how you can actually generate evidence that you're doing so and getting traction for both anything you're entering in this hackathon during the Adoptathon phase and also just in general. So Tara's going to start us off, and we'll go from there. So let me get this screen share on.
Yeah, and just to add, I think if you're having any technical difficulties, I think you should be able to hear us right now. I think someone's saying that they can't hear anything, so check your volume. But you should be able to hear us right now. The only thing I would add is, feel free to add any questions into the chat window on your right, and we'll try to answer them as we get along. Cool. All right, let's get started. So this is a presentation I shared at the Graph Day. Was it earlier this year or last year? I can't remember. The years are slipping by.
Yeah, earlier this year.
Well, we're still trying to drive adoption in the D-Web, so we're still on this journey. But this is cool. This is going to be a really quick talk around what it feels like to design for an emerging technology, all the challenges that come with it. And in the second half, Dan's going to jump in with some tips and tricks on how to drive traction in this space. So cool. This is going to be super light, easy, interactive, so feel free to jump in. So right before we begin, talking about driving and measuring adoption, I wanted to, oops, there you go. Right. Oh, there you go. So I wanted to bring sort of another technology that was emerging about 200 years ago, which was the bicycle. And so I went down in a little bit of a rabbit hole a couple of months ago, understanding the history of the evolution of the bicycle. And what was cool was that it really had a lot of similarities to what it felt like in this open source distributed movement that we are going through today. So instead of being born from a single inventor, the bicycle went through, over a period of about 100 years, very, very many different iterations. And what was wonderful about it was that anyone could contribute to the design of the bicycle. So over time, the very first iteration didn't even have pedals. So the way you got around it was you actually had to take large strides while just mounting on top of it. And over time, we made the wheels bigger, we made the wheels smaller, we added sort of drive chains to the back so that it was much more efficient in terms of driving forward with pedal power and so on and so forth, until we got to what it looks like, very much today, the modern bicycle in 1888. But it took a period of about 60 to 70 years for these different iterations to happen. And once we got there, it became an enduring design that lasted for over 200 years. And the one on the right, as you can see, is very much what we see on the streets today. But the funny thing about the bicycle was that it even had its own hype cycle. These are actual press quotes from newspapers in the day. In 1890, for example, I think the Washington Post said that bicycle was a passing fad for music hall types, aka hipsters. Then at the peak, everyone was proclaiming that bicycling is the national sport, before falling down to the trough of despair and saying that popularity of the wheel is doomed. In 1906, saying that cycling was definitely dead. But as we know now, this just wasn't true. Over time, bikes just got better and sturdier. Infrastructure like roads got a lot smoother, and it proved to be anything but a passing fad. So drawing an analogy to where we are today in the evolution of the decentralized web, are we still here? Or are we closer to this? When do we get something like that? So, I think it's hard to say, but I have a feeling that we're still very, very, very early in this evolution of the decentralized web. And it's hard to really get a sense of what adoption really looks like. I mean, we're looking at different things like on-chain transactions or number of applications or daily active wallet addresses, for example, or even sort of daily transaction volume. And it's still hard to kind of get a sense of what metrics truly make sense. If you're designing for Web 2 today, you have a lot of metrics in the space that, you can pop up, whether it's like monthly active users or daily active users. But when we're looking at sort of on-chain transactions in layer 1 and layer 2, it becomes a little harder to get a sense of what it feels like to measure swells in the space or sort of slowdowns in the space. I think we're not quite there yet. We're trying to figure it out along the way. But what's pretty clear is that we're still an order of magnitude behind compared to Web 2 startups. If you compare the number of, say, for example, global users in the payment space, for example, you have about 20 million Coinbase users compared to, 254 million global PayPal users. 10 million Brave browser downloads is an estimate to about 1 billion active Chrome users. And comparing sort of decentralized chat users, we have about maybe 100,000 Riot Chat app downloads on Android compared to over 10 million plus Slack app downloads on Android. So we're, still, at the tiniest fraction of where we can be and where we, hopefully will be in a few years. So here are some top challenges, to overcome in this space. Obviously, we're facing a ton of them, apart from, looking at different applications and use cases. We're looking at sort of regulatory uncertainty and, sort of technical developments like scaling. But one thing that we can sort of really look at, and what I want to focus on today, is user experience. And why is this important? This is important because I think, in a very, very deeply technical space like the blockchain, we're creating a ton of new user behavior and new sort of metaphors that can be intimidating for a large group of users. If you're not, deep into crypto, if you're not deep into finance or technology, this can be a very, very scary space to work in. And if we did that, then we're merely just creating experiences for the top tier of users, and we're not really creating a decentralized sort of movement at all. So just for a quick example, and this is a little bit outdated now, I think hopefully with interfaces like Dapps, it's a lot easier today. But I did this flow of creating a MetaMask wallet to creating a CDPO maker, and it took me about 40 steps. And this doesn't include any Googling or any sort of looking up of terms that could be extremely intimidating. But yeah, this was a pretty frightening process for me. Even just going through, starting a MetaMask wallet, downloading the seed, to creating a CDPO maker. So it's still a pretty intimidating process. So how can we make this easier for users? In the next, sort of 15 minutes, I want to do a really quick survey of UX experiments and best practices that we're seeing emerge in the space that could make this a little easier for people to just jump in and start using a lot of the sort of wonderful dApps that we're building today. So here are the 3 major steps, I think, to onboard someone new to crypto. 1, creating a new wallet. 2, acquiring crypto. And 3, making a transaction. And I'm going to just touch on a few key points or key moments that we can, sort of design for in this space. So let's jump in. So the seed phrase experience. Seed phrases still have gnarly UX. I remember the first time I opened my Bitcoin wallet, and this was back in 2010, I didn't know what to do with my seed phrases. I think I emailed them to myself or something like that, which is something you should not do. But it's still a very, very gnarly sort of experience for anyone to have to write down these 12 words. It's scary. You're afraid of losing it, misspelling it, or dropping it altogether. So how can we sort of design this to communicate the importance of it? This is where the concept of designing a little bit of friction into the process actually is an interesting prompt, because I think in usual, typical interface design, we're like, make this as seamless as possible, make this a flow that no one has to think about. But in terms of sort of the gravity of this moment, you might actually want to design a moment where the user actually has to take a little bit more time to think about it or to write it down, just to communicate the gravity of that moment itself. And obviously a reminder to store it safe. I do like what MetaMask did, where in order to confirm your seed backup phrase, instead of typing it all in, they want you to do sort of a puzzle piece type arrangement, just to make sure that you have the words written in the right order. We love the idea of an incremental sort of ownership. So what this means is, when someone starts a wallet, maybe not front loading the entire seed phrase experience at the start. What you could do is to actually wait till, whether the wallet has crossed a certain threshold in terms of its balance before, nudging them towards downloading their seed phrase or backing it up or anything like that. So what we call this is sort of an incremental sort of ownership tiers. So to make it a lot more seamless for crypto newbies, so we don't have to just front load them with crazy experiences like seed phrase, backing up their seed phrase at the start. Loving the concepts of universal login and meta transactions. If you haven't seen this, definitely look it up. Look up blog posts by Alex Van de Sande or Austin Griffith, and they really talk a lot about sort of really great design patterns for onboarding. So one such concept is the idea of a smart contract wallet or a seedless wallet. And what this means is that the keys are stored locally on your device, but the wallet is a smart contract that basically forwards transactions on your behalf after verifying your signature. And what this means is that folks can just sign up with an ENS address and be able to sign into your service and have a wallet right from the start. Oops. Right. Another cool concept to look at is social account recovery by Argent. What I really love about this metaphor is that you actually appoint friends or family to be your guardians of your wallet. And what this means is that you can actually, if you ever lost your keys or you were locked out of your account, be able to, sort of nudge your friend or family through other means like WhatsApp or face-to-face to be able to verify and unlock your account. So I did that recently. I was locked out, and I got my friend to compare basically your emoji PIN code together to make sure they matched before they could unlock me. And I think it took 24 hours before it was fully unlocked. I think someone in the comments said that Universal Login has had an update. Yes, and it looks really good. Definitely check it out. Cool. So cool. So step 2, acquiring crypto. We'll jump past it pretty quickly. I mean, this is, I think for us in this space, we're more familiar with this today, but, KYC AML compliance flows can be super scary to a lot of people. A rule of thumb is definitely use gradual verification flows. And what this means is only ask for the bare minimum as the user progresses through using your Dapps or app. If it's a small amount and you don't need their full, SSN or all their full information, don't ask for it. Just, sort of space it out and tier it out so you're not, just overloading them at once with just an insane amount of requests for information and personal information. I really like how compliance APIs like, Kakino or Coinbase or Wire are doing it. Definitely check out how this company Sum and Substance is doing KYC, and they kind of make it a very friendly sort of process that's non-intimidating and doesn't feel like you're at the DMV. Obviously, earning crypto, we need to get more sites to pay out in crypto, and that's sort of been increasingly a challenge. I think sites like Upwork was allowing that for a little while, but it's harder. Gitcoin is pretty cool, or Coinbase Earn, where you actually get to accept crypto. That's another way of acquiring crypto for many users, which is super interesting as well. And last but not least, it's making a transaction. And this is, I think, still one of the most confusing and intimidating steps for any new user is making a transaction. So very first of all, I think have empathy for human readability in terms of crypto addresses. Crypto addresses are a long string of text that is machine readable, but not very human readable. Transactions amounts. If you look at the little diagram on the right, this is a screenshot from a project that I really, really love and respect, but their interface is extremely hard to use because just even look at the number of decimal points in the sort of transaction amount, and you don't actually need that many. I think just the cognitive load of looking at these many decimal points just drives up the unusability of it all. So try to reduce it to maybe 3 decimal places at the maximum to encourage less mental calibration, and maybe think about using something like ENS, Ethereum Name Service, to shorten the crypto address. So this is an example of how much cleaner it could look. Excuse me. From lowering your decimal points and using an ENS address to doing something like that. So huge difference, and it really cleans up your interface.
What are your thoughts on showing currency price instead of the ETH?
Oh, you mean like denominating it in like a USD or something?
Yeah.
I think it depends. I mean, I think there's a lot of philosophical arguments, pros and cons, around that. I think if you are and it depends on who your target audience is. I think if your target audience is looking at it in comparison to a fiat currency, whether it's an exchange or even if it's a sort of an in-game currency, I would say, definitely go for a fiat currency if it just causes less mental calibration. If I'm looking at 0.001 ETH right now, I don't even really know what that means in terms of, what it means to my, what it converts into or something like that. Examples I've seen that are really nice is sort of a tap and hold to reveal or switch between fiat and crypto denominations, which is really nice.
Yeah, sometimes even I think what often we see is you'll have one be the primary, and then there's like another in smaller fonts underneath it that kind of gives the conversion.
Yeah.
I think that's often a good way to do it if you're trying to go for a pretty general audience of users. There are some like hardcore open finance or DeFi users and like active traders who may like already be thinking 100% in crypto, and so then just showing them crypto prices or crypto amounts is fine. But if you're trying to go for more mainstream users, which hopefully many of you are, having some translation to a currency that people are more familiar with is very helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, although I would recommend doing either revealing having the two there. So both, for example, ETH and USD. And whether you can hide it and reveal it with a tap and hold or have it smaller. Just another anecdote is for example, my Square crypto wallet is denominated mostly in USD, I think. And it kind of freaks me out because every time I open it, the number goes down and I'm like, what happened? And I just realized it's like the price of crypto going down, right? So you just want to make that clear to folks that they're not losing money. It's just it's denominated in price. So yeah, look, if you look at the Square crypto wallet, I mean, I love the interface, don't get me wrong. It's just, I think I had like $20 and now it's like, less and less and less every day. And I keep forgetting that it's in Bitcoin and not fiat. So
all depends on the time horizon. Don't check your crypto prices daily.
Right. So it was like a day-to-day spending wallet. So it just depends on context, but I would definitely recommend putting the two denominations clearly there as well. Was there a comment or no?
No.
Okay, cool. So just hopping along, definitely love this open source API or protocol called Wallet Connect, and definitely look that up. Petro has built like a really cool tool for bridging mobile and desktop sort of payment interfaces. I think that's super seamless, and you can basically make payments for desktop DAGs through your mobile phone. I think a lot more wallets use it. I think it's super, super useful and handy. I think, we make purchases on mobile phones and desktop dApps. In different markets outside of US especially, I think fewer transactions are done on desktop. So super cool, super interesting. And I think the last one I wanted to point out on was notifications, which is something we don't, it's not the sexiest subject, but it's the one that actually has a ton of touch points for a lot of people. So after you complete a transaction, waiting for your transactions to be confirmed is such a nerve-wracking process. And with crypto, it's kind of a bonus and also like a sort of a point to be designed for is that you get so much data and you get to see how many confirmations have gone through. You see the time span and stuff like that. So one quick way to do it, and I drew a quick analogy to a travel app that I found, is that you can do a progressive reveal, which means, it has a really quick notification for just, whatever, your transaction is being confirmed, but you can double tap to reveal more information. I think that's a really nice way to do it, so that you don't overwhelm the user with too much information, but you also, are able to give them more information if they wish to see it. Cool. All right, so I think that's it. I think we're getting closer. So with all the different examples that I showed today, from 40 steps, from getting a MetaMask wallet to creating a CDP, we actually reduced it to 10 clicks. If we just sort of use some of the best practices that we mentioned earlier in this talk, and that's incredible. Being able to access a DeFi dApp in under 10 clicks, I think that if we can do that, that is a future that I'm excited to build, and that just gives access to so many more people. It makes it so much easier to do this and to access these incredible products and incredible sort of visions that we're trying to build today. So yeah, so the ask for you guys as we go along in this space, I think a lot of people in this call are sort of product focused or product first people, which is amazing. Number one, talk to your users. We often do what we call sort of product or user validation days here at IDEO, and what this means is just even talking to a couple of users with a prototype and having them go through it, who's not on your team, can really be an eye-opening experience and can really help validate whether a concept or a moment on experience is worth sort of moving forward, or does it need more tweaking. But getting that sort of raw information from real humans is invaluable, especially at all steps of the journey. I would say collaborate with designers and others. Blockchain by nature is such a multidisciplinary field. You have economists and technologists and designers and philosophers coming together, and I think it's by nature designed for a lot of collaboration. So I hope we do more. And last but not least, let's build a Web3 design system together. I would love to see sort of modular building blocks of best practices, from wallets to transactions to games, any of that. And I think we have to do that together, like we did with the bicycle. So with that, I'd love to turn over to Dan, who's going to talk about how to measure traction.
Yeah, how to measure it. Yeah, so basically, if you're starting to do a lot of these things that Tara was talking about, implementing some of the emerging best practices, or hopefully even pushing them forward, then the question is, like, how do you actually know that what you're doing is working? And so for this, we've got this phase of our hackathon that's a little bit different from most hackathons, which we're calling an Adoptathon. So this is happening the last kind of 2-week period. It kicks off on September 9th. So that's coming up on Monday. It's going to end on September 22nd at 11:59 p.m. Pacific time. So make sure you submit final submissions before then. And the goal here is just to gather evidence that you're building something people want, right? That people are actually using it, they're finding it usable, and they're engaging with it. The goal here is not to get a huge number of users and build like the next big DApp, like maybe you will, that would be amazing, but we're not expecting you to be the next like maker or something like that. Obviously that takes teams of people and like years of time to build something at that level. We're just talking for the purpose of this hackathon about just starting to gather evidence and showing us what you've learned through actually testing what you've created in the field, not just building it and submitting it. We really want to encourage everyone to get feedback from users as early as possible and see where that takes you. So to actually get down to like nitty gritty, you need to submit an initial version of your project before September 9th. So if you do that, what will happen is on September 9th, CoinList is going to change the landing page for the hackathon to list all the projects that have been submitted. So this will be a really great way. Obviously, like you're encouraged to spread it through other channels and share your project with people other ways, but this will be an easy place where people can come and just see all the projects that are being built and get a chance to play around with them. So if you're not, if you haven't submitted at least an initial version that is usable, that people can interact with in some form or fashion by September 9th, it's going to be a little bit harder. You can still submit after then, but it would be very advantageous to get something in by that date, or before September 9th rather. So, and then at the end, what you'll be able to do is update your submission with metrics that you collect, and that will just kind of show us what you've learned during that final 2-week period. So what we're aiming for is, calling back to Tara's example, we want to be closer to this. We're not expecting you to build something, so sleek and so performant in this time period, but we're aiming for something close to that. We're probably not like trying to get super, super futuristic and crazy. Like we're going to aim for something that's a little bit closer to people's normal experience and like something that you can actually measure. And, we're certainly not like talking this, yes, this is a bike shedding joke, but it's also saying like, hey, this is actually pretty cool and usable. But what ultimately we're focused on the bike here, right? We all care about building the best tool, the best experience for users. We're not worried so much about like what it's being packaged and wrapped in. Don't worry about polish on everything. You're looking to gather some metrics, some feedback to tell you if you're pointed in the right direction. So what we're going to be talking about here, I hasn't seen all these slides yet. So what we're talking about here is how do you actually think about choosing the right metrics, right? Just adding more wheels to your bicycle, that's not what we're going for here. You want to think about what are the different potential metrics you could choose, right? So usage is one thing that you can focus on. You can focus on revenue. You can focus on essentially crypto-specific metrics, and you can focus on kind of social or marketing related metrics. So we're not trying to do price related metrics. Like hopefully, I don't think people are probably, from what I've seen, no one's like trying to launch a new token or something, but we're not talking about typical like crypto check the price feed metrics. We're talking about, second these again. We're talking about things that are actually showing what kind of traction you're getting with your project. So the first example is in terms of the usage metrics. So this is something that is pretty typical for traditional apps and like websites and services. So you can think about at a most basic level, just how many visitors do you get? So if you have a website associated with this, making sure you got some Google Analytics or something there so you can at least be tracking and showing a little bit about how much traffic you're able to drive and get people to visit and interact. If you have some kind of registration process, I know a lot of Web3 applications don't have a formal registration. So we'll get to kind of the crypto specific stuff for tracking that. And active users, right? So you can get people to sign up. One thing that's often measured is kind of daily or weekly active. We're talking about such a short span of time here that it probably isn't really relevant for something that you're going to be trying to show for your projects, but just to be aware, that is something that we think about a lot when we're measuring traction adoption is, are people active and how frequently are they active? If you have built an app, there's been a lot of questions about like, do you need to get these into the App Store, into the Google Play Store? Like, no, that's not realistic for the time frame we're talking about. So if you can use test flight or some way to essentially sideload apps and give people a way to do that and test it, you can track those and just show this. And the session length is something, I know that services like Facebook and Instagram talk about a lot about how long people spend, how many minutes or in some cases hours people are spending with their service on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis. So that's a pretty common metric that you might want to track for the type of app that gets used all the time. When we get into the crypto world, there's a little bit of other stuff that we can measure. So what we're really talking about is not just engaging with the app. In some ways, they're engaging with an underlying protocol. So, Tara talked a lot about the kind of 3 big points in terms of creating wallets, getting a balance in there, and having transactions. Absolutely, those are all things that you can track. As you get into things like if you're building anything that is DeFi or open finance related, something that we're seeing a lot more is related to the volume of transactions, number of transactions, or the total assets under management. So how much are people depositing and using? And again, don't over-index on this for this, right? If people are building contracts that are meant to hold value, you probably haven't gotten things audited in this period, and so you're not trying during this period to push people to deposit large sums of money into your applications. We don't want to encourage that. So if you are trying to push people to do that and you haven't done audits, giving people big warnings, letting people know that this is still very much a beta project. Even Instadapp, which has been audited, still has the beta flag on there. They've got, I think, around $25 million or so in deposits through their contracts, but they're still flagging as beta. We need to let users know if there are potential risks associated with these products. But these are all different things you can think about. And one thing that is interesting, depending on your application, is unlike a typical social media app, you may not be trying to get as many daily active users, right? If you're doing stuff that's related to trading or related to lending or borrowing, these are things that people probably are only coming to, every few weeks, every few months, right? It's not a super frequent interaction. So don't optimize for engagement metrics if that's not what the purpose is of the application that you've built in this case. So here are some examples. This is, if you go to Dapp Radar, these are the ones, the top dApps for Ethereum. And you can see that, even these very top ones, and these are kind of like global top tracking, this is, if you look at the number of I believe this is daily actives. I'm trying to move this. Yes. So users within 24 hours. So there are the very top application was 2,000 users, right? You can be in the top 10 on Ethereum with 100 users in 24 hours, right? Or sorry, 500 users in 24 hours. That's crazy. There's not a lot that's happening here relative to kind of traditional applications. So this is saying don't worry if you're not seeing a ton of users. Again, this is an Adoptathon period. We're going to generate some evidence, but if you even get tens of users within 24 hours, that's pretty good. So don't hold yourself to traditional mainstream application standards here. We are trying to accelerate, and Tara's been doing an amazing job kind of pushing the community forward to accelerate to where we will get to there sooner than later. But for the purposes of this, we're not trying to get to that point. And even things when you're looking at the volume value, you can see is wildly different that is going through these things. So we're seeing $5 million going through here equivalent, and still fewer users than folks with $302 in volume, right? Because that's collectible. So these metrics are not all applicable across all applications. This is just a sample of different things that you can think about depending on what type of application you're building.
I mean, that's actually one of the pretty key things as a product sort of person moving forward is figuring out what metrics make sense for you, and a lot of them may not. Yeah.
So don't go for vanity metrics. Think about what's actually going to move the needle for you if you're building this long term, but B, if you're just trying to demonstrate traction, what is the most important thing to show that people are doing this? Is it number of active addresses? Is it number of transactions, number of users with multiple transactions within a certain period? It can vary pretty widely. So again, this is looking at stuff where there's kind of more related to like lending and borrowing. This is stuff where you're not going to have a high volume of transactions, but you're starting to see some pretty big numbers in terms of the amount of value, whether you want to call it assets under management, assets under contract. This has become a popular one to be looking at if you're talking about open finance or DeFi apps. This is the source for this is DeFi Pulse, just DeFiPulse.com, I believe. And they've got a nice little ranking site, and you can read more about some of the projects there. But just another example of a metric that you could potentially be using. So probably less relevant for a lot of the projects that I've been seeing kind of submitted so far. But one thing you can think about is revenue metrics, right? So if you actually are charging people for something, crazy concept, I know, then looking at like what is the total revenue that you can generate, how much revenue are you generating per user, and then as we all know, kind of these freemium models are pretty popular in Web 2, and we're actually starting to see some of those emerge in crypto as well, people experimenting with variations on this, is looking at your conversion rate. And so you can see for these popular products, like if you get a like 4% conversion rate from free to paid, that's pretty darn good. Spotify is just like ridiculous, off the charts. Like they're selling music, so okay, great, they're able to do that. But if you are even like low single digit conversion, so if you get 100 people to come through and use your app in some fashion, and like 2 of them also pay you for it during this period, like that's actually pretty good. We'd be kind of impressed by that. So just think about different ways that if you do have a revenue generation potential, that's one of the strongest signals, right? Visits to your site is not nearly as strong a signal that you're building something that people want as if you actually are having people pay you for it. So to the extent that it makes sense, that would be a metric that would be great to be able to show us. And then kind of traditional metrics, just kind of almost like more marketing or kind of social metrics. So if you think about like who is going to be wanting to learn about, talk about your app. So just, if you set up a Twitter account or, Facebook page, or you post it on Reddit, just looking at like how many people are engaging with your content, are talking about it, are following you to get updates. Like that's a way that you can actually show some traction as well. Obviously, like we don't want you just to throw up a landing page. The point is a hackathon to actually build something. So assuming you've built something that people can interact with in some way, seeing that they want to engage, they're excited to talk about it, they're excited to hear more from you as there are further developments and updates, that's a nice thing that you can show as well. Because again, this is a short time frame. You're not putting out a finished, polished product. So anything that you can do to kind of start getting and finding those early users and tweaking and making sure you're building towards their needs and onboarding them, anything that generates evidence around that, we would love to see that. So just getting to the end here, there's still time to get involved. If you haven't actually started yet, you can go to the CoinList website. The Adoptathon again starts September 9th. Everything ends on September 20th, 11:59 p.m. Pacific time. And that's the message. That's what we wanted to share with you guys. So I'm actually just gonna go back and kind of leave it here. We're gonna maybe kind of stop our share and go back to video here. So we've got about 15 minutes or so that we can kind of answer questions. So if you've got questions about about kind of Web3 usability stuff, if you've got questions about how to measure adoption and kind of demonstrate the usability in relation to the Hackathon and Adoptathon, we're happy to take questions this time. Looks like we don't have so many people would be too crazy. If you want to try to jump in, you can, or you can just enter it in the chat and we can answer there as well.
I think my question was more around like in terms of crypto, you think a lot about data privacy and how you measure people's data. And one question I did that's been on my mind is how do you measure people's data in the right way, I guess, in a way that would be acceptable to someone who is using your platform and knows that you are tracking their data. Because I had this experience with Facebook a while ago where I really wanted a feature, and then I was looking to see, okay, where can I just talk to Facebook and be like, hey, I want this feature. So I think that if we kind of have that approach of going, we're not using your data for anything, but if you want a new feature, it'd be awesome to have a channel for you to give us back data in a sense. So have you guys would have put any thought into how do we kind of put that message into an app or sustainably, not sustainably, but track data in the right way?
I mean, I think communication is, so to repeat back the question, just to make sure I heard it right, you're talking about, or you're concerned about data privacy, right? Yeah. And how you communicate that to the user in terms of data you're keeping, data you're not.
Yeah, it's kind of just if someone's using my app, I want them to know that it's just metadata. It's just data that I'm tracking that is maybe what they're using, but not their location, things like that. So what's data that we can track that is if a user did see that their statistics, you'd be totally fine with, especially being a really crazy crypto person.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think,
crypto users are a little more sensitive to that.
Yeah, super sensitive, right? I mean, I think, keeping the interface super clean and, communicating even in one line that, you have a lot of integrity with data, I think makes a lot of sense. And I think, obviously a lot of other content marketing around, blog posts and stuff, stating your intention could go a long way. But I think, even your sensitivity towards integrity with handling data, I think will shine through in the product. I think if you communicate that clearly, and in external materials as well, because I think that's something that a lot of people would appreciate, when it's out there.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a balance between kind of push and pull feedback, right? If you're pulling data from people without them knowing it, that has been the Web 2 paradigm. Generally people are now trying to get away from that a little more. Mm-hmm. But I think to your point, especially at this phase, making sure there's some way in your app or on your site that people can actually submit feedback, or potentially even that you can prompt them to give you feedback. Definitely that when it's opt-in, go for it, right? Yeah, I think it's right to be questioning and thinking about what it is. Don't go all panopticon on people just for the sake of the hackathon. Kind of figure out where's right for you. We've got a couple questions in chat. So question first from John. Why are we giving away money for people to make something? What's our gain? So one of the things we do is we also invest in this space. This is that we want to push the whole space forward. We're also hoping that if people end up building projects here that they're excited about, they will come talk to us about potentially investing in it if you're building a venture that you're taking forward. We have all these 5 different protocol partners that are part of it. They're also members of our startup studio, and so we're helping them also get people building on top of their platforms because they're building layer 1 blockchain protocols. They're all constantly looking to attract more developers, more builders onto their platforms, and so we're trying to help get more folks educated and building and using these platforms.
Yep. So I think there's a question about sponsor tools. Should we only use sponsor tools to build our prototypes?
No, not at all. Obviously we'd love you to build on the platforms that our sponsors provide, but we want you to create awesome, exciting experiences for people. And so a lot of the tools that Tara shared are not official sponsors for the hackathon, but if you want to use like stuff like ENS and stuff, like go for it. Great, we'd love to see that. There's no restrictions on what you can or cannot use for tools to build.
Cool. And another question from Han, which is about, is publishing a conceptual prototype for Dapps sufficient enough, or do you need it to be built out?
That's a good question. I would encourage people, like, we want to, be very inclusive to include as many people as possible. We obviously have to, like, we're trying to put you on a level playing field, and so we can't essentially award as many points to something that is just kind of visual, conceptual walkthrough in Figma versus something that actually is like built out and functional. That said, like, do submit it. Like, we'd love to see that. Like, we're reviewing, and I think we're going to be trying to give at least some amount of feedback to everyone who enters. So, like, please go ahead and do submit that. Yeah,
and just to expand on that a little bit, I think it's it's about making sure that there's technical feasibility as well with the concept. And not to, and I see Han, you're saying that you're a UX designer, and that's great. We'd love to see sort of your concepts for it. Try to find a dev partner to collaborate with if possible. And I think the main impetus there is just that making sure that the concept is technically feasible and can exist in the real world. And I think that's the main reason for it.
Yeah, but again, like, if you are a UX designer, it's a little late. If you like having trouble finding a developer to work on this with you, do go ahead and submit that, right? Because it'll be up on the site, people can see it, and this might be a nice way for you to find somebody who actually wants to help you build this out and take it forward. So, like, we don't want anyone to feel like they can't submit something. We have one person I know who is working on essentially a list of tools and resources in the Tezos ecosystem, and even that, like, that's something where, like, it's a GitHub repo, and we provided feedback and encouragement around ways to actually make that list more useful and usable for people. So the bar is wherever you feel like setting it for yourself. There are prizes, but that shouldn't be the primary motivator here. Honestly, in some ways that's marketing. For some people, it can be important, make a difference, but we really just want everyone to be as engaged as possible.
Yeah, it's great. I think Ed's already facilitating an introduction to a dev, so
awesome.
Great. Hopefully great things turn out.
Yeah.
Cool. So, going through the other questions really quickly, for the Monday submission for the app, are we supposed to submit the APK?
Yes. I mean, you need to submit whatever is going to be necessary for people to be able to interact with what you've built, right? And so, also if it's an APK and people have to sideload it and stuff, giving a link, either a short description for yourself or a link to instructions for loading it, that would be helpful so people know how to do that. Yeah, you want to have people be able to interact with it. So whatever they need to do that. A little bit on the side, but there was a question about, we mentioned that we do, invest as well in projects in this space. Our ticket is typically around $250,000 up to $500,000 in some cases. And we're typically investing around seed stage, sometimes up to Series A as well.
Cool. Well, maybe any more questions in the last couple of minutes?
Hey guys, I've got a question. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah. Yes, we can.
Excellent. So we're building a B2B application, and we already have an existing application that we're integrating a kind of crypto incentive system into. And so I guess I have a question around what constitutes adoption, because initially we would probably manage the accounts and keys for our customers ourselves until they want to take them on. Does that make sense? And I'm wondering whether that, like, in some sense, that's kind of an arbitrary adoption, right? They're not really doing anything different initially. They're just receiving some payment in a token, for example.
That's a great point. So I would assume, and sorry, can you go on mute because I think it's getting an echo back. I would assume that there's some kind of opt-in for this, right? So it's not suddenly like you're taking all your users and they're suddenly active users of the crypto piece, although maybe they are. one thing that we've had a number of people ask, and we try to answer in different forms, is can you submit something that you started working on before the hackathon started? The answer is absolutely yes, but you need to be very clear about what was built prior to the hackathon and what was actually done since the hackathon started. I think it was August 5th. And so what I would be, for your case, I would say we're not going to want to look at like the overall number of users that you have for your product, because it's already been out there and it doesn't really have anything to do with what you've built during this hackathon. But what I would say is, what can you show in terms of metrics for, are people engaging with and using these new features that you've built in during the hackathon period? So whether it's people opting in to use crypto in some fashion, whether it's then cashing out, whether it's interacting with the crypto in some way beyond what just happens by default now on your platform. It can be anything that you think is appropriate, but what we're really looking to do is get some metrics that show whether what you built during this period is getting traction.
Yeah, and it's very much for you too. You know, it's to help help you and your team validate demand for the app. You know, and see if this is something that you might want to put more time and energy into, making it a full-time thing or a full run. Taking a full run at it or anything like that. So as much as it is for the hackathon, it really is a really great way to gut check the viability of the application itself and the demand for it too. So I hope you have fun with it.
Perfect. That's really clear, guys. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Cool.
Hey guys, I have one more question, if there's time for it.
Yep, sure thing. Yep. Well, I think this will be our last question.
So I wonder, doing the learnings from the Adoptathon and actually doing user testing, how much do you value kind of the documentation of what was the user testing done? We had this login and now the users think it's shit, so we changed it to this one based on this feedback. Now they love it. Do you wanna learn about the process too?
Absolutely. That's absolutely something that we'd love to learn about. Yeah, that's because seeing the path that you got there and like the progress that's made, that's something that we're really looking for. So our hope is that this nudge to get user feedback and start measuring important metrics for yourself early on is helpful and helps push people forward. And so absolutely, we're looking for evidence that you are using this and building it into your process and learning and improving on that basis. So yes, please do submit documentation. And maybe a final point to make is just saying, like, we have 1,000 users, right? If you can include something in your submission that kind of gives us a way to verify that in some fashion, that's helpful. We're not going to go and actually verify everything, but certainly before we award a prize to anything, we're going to go and like do a little bit more diligence on whatever metrics are shared by those projects. So yeah, please do give us as much as possible a way that we can kind of get to verify whatever metrics you're providing.
Yeah, validating or invalidating feature is extremely valuable for us. So definitely document. I think you would not regret it in 6 months when you're like, what was it the person said again? Cool. Yeah. So this was wonderful. Thanks for joining us for the hour. It's really great to hear from all of you, and we're super excited to see what you guys built.
Yeah, and we'll be posting this online so people can watch it if they weren't able to attend as well. Yeah. But hit us up on Twitter, at Taratan, at Elitzer, and then overall it's at IDEO CoLab. And we're also in the Discord for the hackathon, so you can find us there too. All right, thanks everyone.
See you guys.
Bye.
Bye.